So we scanned another system through Nmap and we saw that there existed a vulnerability on port 21, which is the FTP port. And the vulnerability was FTP VSFTPD backdoor. And then in MSF console or Metasploit, we search for that vulnerability and we are lucky that that exploit exists for that vulnerability. So what that means is there is a script in Metasploit or MSF console that we can use to gain shell. So let's try to do that. So what we do is we copy the name of this exploit and we say use and then paste the name of this exploit. Okay, so now you can see earlier it was just MSF and then the terminal. Now it's MSF and the name of that exploit and then the terminal. So an exploit needs some requirements, and how to see what are the requirements of that particular exploit, we type options. So you can see it says rhost and rport are both required. In the required column it says yes, but there is no current setting for rhost. Rhost is basically the target host. So we'll set rhost, which will be the target IP. This was the IP. Yes. Okay. So we'll confirm by typing options again, and we see that 130 is now set. Okay, so we have selected the exploit and we have set the IP address. Now what we need to do is set the payload. And for each exploit, there are certain payloads that we can use. For example, there will be different payloads that we can use for Windows server. There will be different payloads that we can use for a Linux server. So for each exploit, we'll need to see which payloads are available. So we'll type show payloads. So for this particular exploit, only one payload is available. So we'll copy this. And we'll say set payload. Now if you type options, you can see rhost is set. And then the payload options, cmd/unix is same. So we can type check to see if this exploit is exploitable or not. But this particular exploit does not support check. So what exactly this means is sometimes some exploits give you the option So we'll try exploit. So now it will try to gain shell on that machine and we see it says found shell. So now how to make sure that we have gained access to that machine. So earlier our machine's IP was 192.168.227.129. So if I do ifconfig now, I see 192.168.227.130. That means I am on that machine. So I have hacked or compromised this machine now through exploit of FTP using Metasploit as a tool. So if I do ls, I can see all the files that are on that machine. So if I do cd -etc, so I went into etc folder. And this file is of interest to me because it contains the passwords. So if this is a file, so shadow was basically not a folder, it was a file. That's why I could not go inside it. So I opened this file, and this basically has the usernames configured on this machine and their passwords. But the passwords are hashed. This is the hash value of the password. The shadow file contains hashed passwords. But there are very easily available tools. For example, pass the hash, in which we can pass the hash and then try to gain the access. So what we have seen is we used Metasploit. After all the scanning, whatever there was a vulnerability, we tried to search for that particular vulnerability if we can find an exploit, and then we exploited or hacked that machine through that exploit. Any questions in this? Okay. Can you all do this in your laptops? Okay, now I will close this and we'll use another tool, which is Armitage. Okay, so Armitage is another tool, uses the same engine. So in this, already 192.168.227.230 is added. So you can say this is a GUI version of Metasploit. You can do scanning from within this tool. So let's say I did an OS scan, it will confirm the IP. And the normal scan is running in the background, which tries to find the open ports and everything. These are just other hosts that I did previously in this tool. So you can see that I ran OS scan on this and it has detected it's a Linux machine. If it was Windows, you could see the Windows logo. So now so this host is selected right now because you can see the green dotted line. So if I say attack, if I go to attacks and I say find attacks, it will do that for this machine only. And what it's doing right now is basically, according to the services and the ports open on that machine, it will list the possible exploits. For example, let's say FTP port is open on this machine, FTP service is running. So it will list the exploits of FTP. And for example, this is a Linux machine. So it will list the exploits of Linux only. It will not list the exploits of Windows. So according to the operating system, according to the ports, according to the services, it will list the exploits that are possible, which we can check or try to exploit. Okay. So after I did attacks and then find attacks, if I right click here, I can see an option of attacks. So in attacks, according to the services running, I can see the exploits. So what was the exploit that we ran in Metasploit? VSF TPD. Can you guys see that here? We ran this exploit, VSF TPD backdoor, in the command line version that we just did. Okay, so we can do that from here as well. So it will confirm this is the L host, which is my local host, R host 130. So in command line we had to specify. In this GUI version, it picked it itself because this host is selected. It will just confirm the R port, the L port, or the listening port on the local host. And then once you see everything is fine, it will also show you the description. So always before running an exploit, we read the description. Why? Because if it's a production environment, we don't want to, crash the system. So if it says anything like that, we try not to do it in someone else's system or a production system. So we do launch. So it says found shell. And if you can see, it shows, it turns it into red, which means the system has been compromised. Now, if I right click here, it shows me shell 1. So if I say interact, it will open a new tab here. And I typed ls and it shows me all the machines. So just like the command line version, but it's better to manage. For example, if you have more than one host, you're trying to, running a scan and trying different exploits on different machines. So you can just use this GUI version to better manage your attacks. And then through this shell, you can also upload files. Why? Because we want to, maybe create a backdoor so that we don't have to scan and try to exploit the machine every time. So maybe we just create a backdoor or for example, we saw in the command line that we can get the password file, or maybe create a new user. That is post exploitation. But right now, we'll just stick or we'll just focus on how we gained the shell through Metasploit and Armitage, which is the, you can say, the GUI version. Any questions? Okay. So this session was exploitation through Metasploit and Armitage.